You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
People with felony convictions, in which the burden rests on the individual, the governor, to have the ban lifted. Iowa's application process, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, makes it one of the strictest bans in the country. Whenever the voting rights is, of course, always important and is the first and permanent central issue of the League of Women Voters at the national, state, and local levels. Whenever states pass laws to restrict voters, voter registration, or access to the voting booth, the League joins forces with other civil rights organizations to challenge those laws in court. The League of Women Voters of Iowa has been focused for some time on challenging the voting ban for returning citizens by advocating with legislators, joining a court case, and recently by working with a coalition to propose legislation to modify the ban. The moderator for tonight's program, Mike Cervantes, who is also the director of a local organization called Inside Out, has worked for similar goals since at least 2004, first with a group of high school students in Cedar Rapids, and more recently through advocacy with the organization he now directs. Inside Out is an organization focused on working to smooth the path from incarceration to society by helping individuals secure training, vital identification papers, housing, jobs, and in this case, restoration of the right to vote. So far this year, the local Iowa City Inside Out has already served at least 58 individuals. I read that on their website. Probably there are more by now. Both the League of Women Voters of Johnson County and Inside Out are nonpartisan organizations that advocate on issues and neither support nor oppose any party or candidate. Index cards are in the back, and you can also raise your hand to get one. You're encouraged to write down your questions when you think of them. We'll be collecting them and giving them to Mike so that he can look at them, sort through them, and answer them. And he hopes, too, that there will be time at the very end for an open question session. So thank you all for coming, and thanks especially to Mike Cervantes for hosting this, for doing this program.
My name is John Whiston, and I'm on the board of Inside Out. Jeremy Flaming, who is also on the board at Inside Out, and I are going to be out in the hall. We're both attorneys, and if there's anybody here that wants to start the paperwork for getting a restoration of rights for an Iowa felony, come out and we can get started on that. If you have any questions, so for instance, I had a question from an Inside Out participant about how to deal with Arizona, getting rights restored for an Arizona felony, we can talk about that. We can figure out a way to do it. And I want to take just about 2 minutes to complain. Is that okay? Yeah. And so I just started trying to figure out how to do this to get ready for the presentation. And I'm a lawyer. You know, I was a lawyer for 30 years, and it is really an ordeal. The governor set up a way to apply about a year ago, and it was horribly intrusive. You had to submit a credit report. You had to write an essay. You had to write a personal statement about why you should have your voting rights back. So they ash-canned that application in May, and now we're dealing with a new application that requires you to list all of your convictions in Iowa, shoplifting, and include how much you owe on your fines. So I'm finding it really oppressive, and I can't imagine how the governor or anybody in the state would expect someone without a legal degree to work their way through it. And it actually shows that the statistics that I've seen most recently and I'm sure Daniel Zeno can talk with much more authority than I can, that we have about 21,000 people in the state of Iowa who have lost their citizenship rights, their voting rights, and their right to serve on a jury. 148 have got them restored. All right? Well, so enough complaining, now a little bit of action. So if there's anybody that would like to speak with Jeremy or me, we'll be outside through the whole program.
All right.
Good evening. First of all, I want to say welcome to Why Can't We Vote? Tonight's forum is on the right to vote for our citizens in this country, in particular in Iowa. My name is Mike Cervantes. I'm the Director of Inside Out Reentry, and before I go any further, I just want to say I'm very excited to be here tonight, and I'm very disappointed to be here tonight. I'm disappointed because 12 years ago I began working on this issue, and we, with a group of high school students, some who are on their way here and will be speaking a little bit later, we thought it was a successful effort to change the policy in Iowa. But here we are 12 years later dealing with the same issue. So I'm disappointed in that way, but I'm very excited because of all of you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And I'm very excited that we have someone with people with expertise like John and Daniel Zeno is going to speak, who have a little more knowledge about this issue than we did 12 years ago, trying to put this together in a high school class up in Cedar Rapids. I want to also thank the League of Women Voters of Johnson County for co-hosting the event this evening, and to thank the Iowa City Public Library for offering us this great space. Our goal tonight is to address this question: why can't we vote? And in particular, the question is, why, when a person is convicted of a felony, any felony in the state of Iowa, serves their time, completes probation and parole, is back in the community, is working, maybe raising a family, paying taxes, why does that person need to request permission from the governor's office to become, for the basic right of the right to vote? At the heart of this question really lies, is voting a fundamental right as a citizen in this country? And that's really one of the questions we're looking at. This evening we'll explore, discuss, and debate this, how Iowa addresses the right to vote. We're going to hear all sides. And each of you will have a chance to ask any question you have. And you'll also be given a chance hopefully you have the blue sheet of information, a way to connect and get more information as well about the issue. Inside Out is a nonprofit organization that works with people returning from incarceration. And we work as really a nuts and bolts organization. We work on helping people find work, find a place to live, get connected with services in the community. But also we strive to build a community of support and look at what broader justice issues need to be addressed. And tonight is an example of that, an example of one of those issues that we believe needs to be addressed. Okay, let me start by talking about this image right here. Hopefully you can hear me. I share this image because you got a room full of happy people, right? Smiling, and this was taking place this past summer in Des Moines at a place called Freedom House, which is a reentry house for people who are returning from incarceration in the Des Moines area to help get back on their feet. But there's two things you can't see in this picture. There's two things that you might not notice. One of them is Bob right here. Bob is a great guy, but he's really shy and didn't want his picture taken, so he hid in the back. But the second thing you might not notice is that some of these individuals smiling on this beautiful day we're in Des Moines are not able to vote next Tuesday on this election. I want you to take a look at this picture. This is taking place in a prison in the state of Maine. These individuals are discussing the election next week, and they're discussing who they would like to vote for. Because in the state of Maine and Vermont, you are able to vote while you are incarcerated.
Right.
In fact, I really like what the Vermont Secretary of State had to say. She describes it this way. She says, Vermont has taken the position that the more we can get folks in prison involved in the community in a responsible way, the better the chances of reintroducing them to the civilian world in a responsible way. The last image shows both of them and asks the question, what is the difference? And that's the question we're trying to ask tonight and try to get to the bottom of. And that is the right to vote a fundamental right for citizens in this country? And is the Iowa policy violation of that right? That's the question we're going to try to get at. Okay. All right. Our schedule tonight goes as follows. First, we're going to hear from two individuals who have lost the right to vote in the state, and they're going to tell about their story. And they're going to talk about what it meant to them to not be able to vote. The second, we're going to have Daniel Zeno from who is the policy counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union of Iowa. He'll be presenting the ACLU and the state of Iowa's position on the Supreme Court case this summer, Griffin versus Pate, that was decided by the Iowa Supreme Court. He'll also give us some historical background, and this is something I'm very excited about, historical background on why we are where we are. You know, we see that Iowa is restricted like only 2 other states, and we're like, why are we there? So he'll be giving some background on that. And third, we're going to hear from 2 community activists from Cedar Rapids. They're 12 years ago, they were part of that fight to change things, and it's a successful fight to change things in Iowa. They're going to share their story about what they did, and they're also going to talk about what's going on now in the state to try to make some changes. Finally, we're going to open the floor for questions. This will be a more broad questions. If you have a question about a particular speaker, please fill out the card and just hold it up, and we're going to try to collect them to avoid repetition. So if you have a question, just hold it up, and we'll collect them and read them out loud. All right, so let's begin with 2 people I'm very glad to introduce. They're affected by this policy directly. First, we're going to hear from Letitia Molina, and then we'll hear from Tracy Grip. Letitia.
Hello, my name is Letitia Molina. For most of my life, I didn't care about voting or being a part of the community. But I have been clean for 5 years, and I have changed my life. I've grown to understand the importance of voting and being a good citizen. I'm paying taxes. I've seen wrong, and I can't vote. It seems wrong that I can't vote, but most important to me is voting in school issues because I have kids and grandkids in school. I get embarrassed when someone asks me if I voted, and I tell them I haven't because I can't. I've done my time, and I paid for it. And I don't think that should be held against me. 1 vote can make a difference. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tracy, and I have actually had my right to vote restored. I was sentenced for drug-related charges in 1998 and received a federal prison sentence of 7.5 years. Upon my release in 2003, I had to wait a certain amount of time before I could even apply for my rights to vote again. The process was pretty grueling then, even still, but I don't think it was as bad as it is now. I was able to come up with the paperwork that was needed, which was just a receipt that my fine was paid, and references and a statement about why I thought that I should have my rights restored. I did receive them from Governor Branstad. I was still on probation, and I don't think that should make a difference at all. I don't think it should make a difference if I had my fines paid even, because it has nothing to do with the electoral process. Every citizen owes money. So, yeah, I got my right to vote restored, and it's done wonders. It's helped me to feel a sense of belonging within my community. I know when I committed my crime, I didn't think anything about losing my right to vote. I didn't think, oh, wait a minute, I better not commit this crime. I'm going to lose my right to vote, you know. So, but it did everything to restore my sense of belonging in the community and as a U.S. citizen. So I hope that this is successful. Just ordeal. Thank you.
All right. Next, we're going to hear from a gentleman I'm very excited to hear from. Over the past 3 years, Daniel Zeno has represented low-income Iowans in civil cases as a staff attorney for the Iowa Legal Aid in Cedar Rapids. Mr. Zeno is a graduate of the University of Iowa College of Law, where he was a recipient of the prestigious Patricia Kane Jean Love Commitment to Social Justice Award, a volunteer intake worker for the Justice for Our Neighbors Immigration Clinic, and a member of the Equal Justice Works National Advisory Committee. It is an honor to welcome Daniel Zeno.
Well, I am happy to be here. So for the past 3 years, I did work at Legal Aid. I now work at the ACLU of Iowa. I'm policy counsel there, so what that means is I lobby in the state legislature to pass good laws and not pass bad laws, and also do some policy work. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is Griffin v. Pate. So it's a case that was decided in June 30th, 2016, by the Iowa Supreme Court about this specific issue. And so before I get that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So in July 4th, 2005, Governor Vilsack, then Governor Vilsack, issued an Executive Order 42. And with that, it did two things. It automatically restored the right to vote for everybody who had been convicted of a felony prior to that date. About 118,000 people, 100,000 people or so. It also established a process, so going forward, everybody who completed their sentence, DCI would tell the governor, and the governor would issue a certificate automatically restoring the right to vote. So that happened in 2005. In large part, actually, because of Mike and the other students in Cedar Rapids. They impressed on the governor, and the governor issued this executive order. So that order was in place for the 2 terms of Governor Vilsack and Governor Culver's term. So everybody who completed their sentence, DCI or wherever they were incarcerated, notified the governor. The governor then issued a restoration of their rights to their last known address. To their last known address and based on receiving information from where they were incarcerated. And that's important because some of those people got lost because if you were incarcerated in a different state and your state didn't notify the Iowa governor never issued a restoration certificate. Under that regime, a person didn't need to pay court costs or fines or fees. They just needed to complete their sentence, complete probation or parole. Then their right was automatically restored. In July 14th, 2011, second executive order of Governor Branstad in his 6th term, I believe it is, that rescinded Governor Vilsack's order. So automatic restoration stopped. It did not take away people's right to vote that was restored under Governor Vilsack. So if a person's right was restored, that remained, but going forward, no more automatic restoration. You had to apply. And under this regime, and that's what's in place right now, a person has to complete an application, get a DCI criminal history record, which costs $15, get printed documents verifying that you are on a payment plan or current on your payments of all fines, court costs, restitution, or attach an explanation of why the person hasn't fully paid. and then mail this whole packet to the governor. As Mike alluded to earlier, initially this was a 2-page application where you had to get a credit check, and there was the last question was, please explain to the governor why he should restore your right to vote. That was modified to now a 1-page application, and the governor likes to say it's only 1 page, as if the length of the document makes it less onerous. But it's 1 page, you have to answer some questions and do this process. From what we've seen, it takes about 1 to 2 months from the time you mail off the application to when the governor makes the decision. Since that order was issued, January 14, 2011, let's see. So this date is as of October 26, so that's a couple of days ago. Let's see, 178 people have had their rights to vote restored. There are about 50,000 Iowans who are ineligible to vote. So that translates into about 0.5% of the ineligible voters have had their rights restored since January 14, 2011. Right? So that gives you a sense of how onerous this process is. The last line on the application is, I certify under penalty of perjury that everything is true and accurate in this application. Perjury, by the way, is a felony. Right? So if you don't put everything properly on the application, you could sort of be in this cycle again. So those are the 2 executive orders. That's sort of the backdrop. So July 5th, 2005, January 14th, 2011. Kelly Griffin, in 2001, so this was before the first executive order, was convicted of a Class D felony. She had a suspended prison sentence and probation, which she discharged in 2006. So when she finished her probation in 2006, because of Governor Vilsack's order, her right to vote was restored. January 7, 2008, Ms. Griffin was convicted of a Class C felony. At that time, Ms. Griffin was a victim of domestic violence, involved in drug activity, and so she was convicted. She got a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. Her defense attorney at that time, in 2008, gave her proper legal advice and told her, when you are finished with your sentence, when you are done with probation, your right to vote will be automatically restored, which was true at that time. Then January 14, 2011 happened, right? Ms. Griffin then completes her sentence in 2013. And based on her previous experience, she had previously been convicted of a felony, had her right to vote restored. Based on the advice of her defense attorney, when you are done, your right to vote will be restored again. She thought she had the right to vote. So in November of that year, November of 2013, she registers to vote and votes in a local election in her town, Montrose, Iowa. Because she says, I have the right to vote. She has 4 kids. Her 8-year-old was learning about voting in school. She brings her daughter to the polls. It's this, this experience that we all want to have, right? She goes to vote. She has her kids. She's teaching about voting, and she votes. The auditor sort of looks through the list and says, oh, you don't have the right to vote. And Ms. Griffin is charged with perjury, a felony. Right? At trial, she testified that the first time she learned that she was not eligible to vote was when the DCI investigator contacted her to talk to her about her ballot. And she said that was the first time I knew that I couldn't vote. Thankfully, a jury acquitted her. They found her not guilty. And so that was sort of her criminal trial. before I get to the Supreme Court case, another case happened, Chido. So Ned Chido and Anthony Bisignano, two Democrats running for Iowa House, I believe, from the Des Moines area. Mr. Chido challenged Mr. Bisignano's eligibility to run for office because he had been convicted of an aggravated misdemeanor, OWI. And the prior case law basically said infamous crime, which is in the Iowa Constitution, it says if you are convicted of an infamous crime, that's the phrase, you can't vote or hold office. And in the past, that had, infamous crime basically meant if the sentence is at least 2 years, which in Iowa, there are some aggravated felonies that you can get 2 years. So Mr. Chido said, my primary opponent, he can't run. He has an aggravated misdemeanor. It got to the Iowa Supreme Court, and the Iowa Supreme Court said, an aggravated misdemeanor is not an infamous crime. The court also said, not all felonies are infamous crimes, but we're not going to define which ones because we don't need to get to that in this case because this is an aggravated misdemeanor. And so it left open the question, well, what is an infamous crime? Since it's not all felonies, which ones are included in that? It also overturned some cases that went back for about 100 years. They basically said there's that 2-year limit, right? If you could get sentenced for 2 years, then it's an infamous crime. The court said that's not true anymore, all right? And so that case was decided in April of 2015, so a month after Ms. Griffin was acquitted. And then the ACLU, representing Ms. Griffin, filed suit based on the Chido case where the court said some felonies are not infamous crimes. So we thought this was an opening to help the court make that determination. So we filed suit, and in this case, our position, the ACLU's position was the Iowa Constitution assures the right to vote to every citizen who is 18 or older and who is an Iowa resident, except for that exception. Unless you're convicted of an infamous crime, then you can't vote and you can't hold office. And again, in Chido, a couple of months, so this was September of 2015, so a year or so later, or earlier, in Chido, the court wrote, quote, voting is a fundamental right in Iowa, indeed the nation. It occupies an irreducibly vital role in our system of government by providing citizens with a voice in our democracy and in the election of those who make laws by which we must all live. The right to vote is found at the heart of representative government and is a preservative of other basic civil and political rights. So stuff we were like, this is good, right? You know, so we're feeling very good about this case. And another thing the court did in Chido was said it's the nature of the crime that puts it into this infamous crime category. Not the length of the sentence, but the nature of the crime. So again, we have Ms. Griffin, whose felony convictions are drug convictions, right? They have nothing to do with violence. They have nothing to do with the electoral process, right? And so our argument essentially was that, court, as you said in Chido, not all felonies are infamous crimes. In fact, in the Iowa Constitution, the word, when it was written way back in the day, and I don't remember the year, fill in the last 2 digits. The drafters use the word felony in some instances, and then use the word infamous crime in other instances. And so our argument was, one, in Chido court, you said not all felonies are infamous crimes. And also, when the drafters wrote the Constitution, they used these 2 different words because they mean 2 different things. What we're asking you to do today is help us understand what infamous crime means. We also argue that if voting is a fundamental right, like the court said it was in Chido, then the legislature shouldn't be able to change that right by defining what a felony is, right? I mean, the session starts in January. If the Iowa legislature decides to, they can pass a law that says what is now an aggravated misdemeanor is a felony, right? And if only it being a felony is enough, then the Iowa legislature can at any time essentially disenfranchise people. Just define something as a felony, and then you don't have the right to vote, right? And we argue that voting is a fundamental right. The legislature should not be able to do that, right? Which is why the court needs to define what an infamous crime is. I want to read you this quote. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, that's their legal arm, filed a brief, in this case, supporting our position. And this is a quote, they quoted a case from Mississippi from 1995. Disenfranchisement is the harshest civil penalty imposed by a democratic society. When brought beneath its axe, the disenfranchised is severed from the body politic and condemned to the lowest form of citizenship, where, voiceless at the ballot box, he or she must sit idly by while others elect civil leaders and choose the fiscal and governmental policies which will govern him or her, right? And so we're arguing this is a fundamental right. And also, you already said all felonies are not infamous crimes. We had some tests where we argued, you know, essentially making the distinction between violent and nonviolent could be one way you could do it. Another way you can do it is any felony that has a direct impact on elections or the electoral process could be an infamous crime. But there has to be some line. Like I said, the NAACP filed a brief, and their brief did a fantastic job of laying out the history of disenfranchisement laws across the country and in Iowa. The reason disenfranchisement laws came about was because when black people got the right to vote, states were trying to find ways to not allow them to vote, right? And so they put laws in place that said, well, if you're convicted of an infamous crime or felony, or knowing that the enforcement of criminal laws disproportionately impacts black people, right? And so if you can get more black people convicted of felonies, you can disenfranchise them forever. And so they did a fantastic job of showing how that has been true across the country and in Iowa, right? And while Iowa has a fantastic record of being at the forefront of a lot of issues, right? Iowa was one of the first states to admit women to law school. Iowa was one of the first states to sanction marriage for same-sex couples. So there's a lot of firsts that Iowa has done. But Iowa also has this other history where for many, many years, Iowa has not been the best place for black people, right? I mean, right now, people in Iowa, black people, are 8 times more likely to be arrested for a drug charge, even though black and whites use drugs at the same rate. And so, like I said, the NAACP did a fantastic job of sort of laying that argument out. The state's argument was that in 2008, the Iowa Constitution was amended. So that section that talks about infamous crimes, back in the day, they didn't use the words that we would use today. And so it said, idiots and insane people. All right? And so the state of Iowa decided, you know, maybe we don't want those words in our Constitution in 2008. So the Constitution was amended to take out those words, and in the place of those words, put a person who's judged mentally incompetent to vote. That's an important distinction, by the way. Persons who are judged mentally incompetent is not the same thing as persons judged mentally incompetent to vote. So a person can be judged mentally incompetent and still have the right to vote. You have to specifically be judged mentally incompetent to not vote. Okay, so that happened in 2008. The state's argument was that when that happened, the citizens of Iowa, the Iowa legislature, could have defined infamous crimes in the way that the ACLU argued it should be defined, but didn't. And therefore, Iowans, when they ratified this change, essentially agreed that infamous crime should stay in there. So that was one of their arguments. The Iowa Code defines infamous crime as any state or federal felony. Back to Chido for a second. The reason Chido was important was because Iowa aggravated misdemeanors are counted as federal felonies, right? And so Mr. Bisignano could have been, if the court had not ruled in his favor, ineligible to hold office because his aggravated misdemeanor was a federal felony. And in Iowa, both state and federal felonies mean you can't vote, okay? The state also argued that infamous crimes does equal all felonies, even though the prior year the court in Chido said, no, they don't. They do not. The court didn't answer what is included in that, but the court clearly said infamous crime and felony are not the same thing. The state argued, yes, it is, court. You should rule in our favor. And then the state also argued that the interpretation of what infamous crime means has evolved over time. And the court should continue to allow the legislature to let it evolve, right? So those were sort of their arguments. On June 30th, 2016, the Iowa Supreme Court ruled against Ms. Griffin in a heartbreaking and close case, 4-3. By the way, in Chido, it was a kind of a complicated how the court came out. But essentially, 3 justices, so a plurality, in other words, not a majority of all the justices, there are 7 justices, but a majority of the biggest majority, essentially. Justices Cady, Hecht, and Zeiger ruled that a crime, essentially that not all felonies are infamous crimes. And so going into this, one of our thought processes was, we got 3, we just need 1 more. If we can get 1 more. As it turns out, we did get 1 more, Justice Wiggins, but then Justice Cady went the other way. And so the court found that Iowa's policy of permanent disenfranchisement of citizens with felony convictions does not violate Iowa's Constitution. Essentially, the court relied on the legislature's definition. The legislature said all felonies equal infamous crimes. The court also bought the argument of the state that the Constitution is evolving and therefore the standard should be evolving. And the court said the meaning of infamous crime today is that infamous crime equals all felonies. That could change in the future, but the way it would change is participate in the democratic process, which is particularly ridiculous when the court says to people who don't have a right to vote, participate in the process to change the definition so you can get your right to vote back, right? And so the court invited the legislature and said to the legislature, you can change the definition. We will determine if it's constitutional or not, but you can change the definition. And so we, and it's on the blue sheet in the back, the ACLU of Iowa, along with a coalition of now 20 other partners, are proposing legislation to define infamous crimes as any nonviolent felony, any violent felony. So essentially all drug charges, the felony of theft of property over $1,000, right? You steal a bike that's worth more than $1,000, you're convicted of a felony, you can't vote for the rest of your life in Iowa, right? And so this legislation would make the line at violent versus nonviolent. If you are convicted of a violent felony, then no automatic restoration. If a nonviolent felony, then automatic restoration. We're also proposing a constitutional amendment sort of as a stopgap. And so that's where we are right now. Right now, a person whose right to vote has been taken away because of a felony conviction has to apply to the governor. Again, the governor, likes to say that the application is only one page and therefore it should be quick and easy. We helped a client put together the application. We didn't charge the client, but if we would have, it would have costed about $1,000, right? And so you imagine a person who has had a felony conviction from my time at Legal Aid. I know having a felony conviction means it's harder to get a job, harder to find housing, right? Harder to do all of the things that you need to do to have money, to have the time to go through this process. In addition to the $15 fee, which the governor says is only $15. But if you don't have $15, that's a lot of money. You also have to get your record, criminal record, from every place that there's been a conviction. So if you had a conviction in 4 different counties in Iowa, you got to contact 4 different clerks of court, get all of those records, gather all of this stuff, get the official record from DCI, fill out the form, sign your name under penalty of perjury, that everything is true and correct, and then submit it to the governor, all to try to get your right to vote back. And again, it takes about 1 to 2 months, and so anybody who is going to get help tonight, it's fantastic that Professor Whiston is here, but it's not going to happen before Election Day, right? And the reality is most people, a lot of people, in, March of 2017, most people will not be thinking about, do I have my right to vote back? Because there won't be an election around, right? This happens when elections roll around, and then people start, thinking about this, and when you do, then you realize how much work you have to do, all of the stuff you have to gather, the money you have to pay, the time it takes. And so it really is a pretty egregious system. Iowa is one of only 3 states in the country that permanently ban people from voting after a felony conviction. Iowa's population, about 3% of Iowa's population are black people. About 25% of Iowa's prison population is black people. About 49% of Iowa's juvenile population, incarcerated population, are black kids, right? And so this has a huge impact on people of color, particularly black people in Iowa. And so, like I said, we are working hard to try to change that, to try to, through the legislature, putting pressure on the governor to try to encourage him to issue a new executive order. But that's sort of where we are now in terms of voting rights for people with felony convictions. And I didn't know this. On the back of this blue sheet, there's this fantastic data about the percentage of people who agree that once a person has been convicted, after they've been convicted, they should be allowed to vote. And it's essentially across the board, right? People understand if you've committed a crime, you do the time, you go to jail, prison, finish probation or parole. Once you are done, you should be able to vote. By the way, under this process, the current process, you have to have completed your sentence or be off probation or parole and be current on your fines and fees, right? Which, again, if you can't find a job, the idea that, the couple $1,000s that you on court fees and court costs and fines and restitution, that you would be current on that, for a lot of people, that's impossible, right? And the governor's position is that your court costs and fines and fees are part of your sentence. That's not, the ACLU strongly disagrees with that. We think rich people shouldn't be able to get their right to vote back because they're rich, right? If you have a felony conviction and you, your family, your community have money, you can pay off the fine the next day. You can apply the next day, right? If you are a poor person, same crime, same prison sentence, you can't apply because you can't pay, right? And we don't think that's a good policy decision or fair, which is why we think, at the very least, this distinction between violent and nonviolent felonies makes sense. So that's where we are right now. And I don't know if I'm taking questions now or are we doing it in the end? Okay, all right.
We're going to have an opportunity to ask general questions after this. We've got two other speakers.
Okay, all right.
Questions that were directed to Dan.
Okay.
How many state constitutions regulate felony voting versus legislative acts? Do you have an idea of that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't have that in my encyclopedia.
Next question. Is there research about the effects of not allowing people convicted to serve on juries? Do you know anything about that?
Not specifically juries. This blue sheet, I didn't put this together, by the way, but it has some fantastic information. I don't know about juries, but it absolutely, research shows that it reduces recidivism, right? If people feel more connected, feel more involved, feel like they can participate, it reduces recidivism. It increases voting in the community. So one of the things, Ms. Griffin, when she brought her kids to vote, right, she is teaching her kids the importance of voting, right? If you have a community of people where there's a large percentage of people who don't vote because they can't vote, guess what's happening? Their kids are not seeing this sort of voting is important. Voting is how you participate. Voting is sort of what we do to participate in our democracy. That's not happening, right? And so restoring the right to vote reduces recidivism, helps, increase participation, right, of not only that person, but whole communities. And I would imagine it would have an impact on jury selection as well.
The next question, this is a question that I've been wondering about all night. I'm glad someone asked it. How does Governor Branstad and those who, not just him, but I think people who argue that the system is fine, justify the decision to demand requests for restoration for the current system? What is the justification?
So I'll read you the first couple of lines from the July, actually, that's not the one, the January 14th, 2011 executive order. I mean, essentially I don't have it actually, so I'm not going to read it. Governor Branstad basically believes paying court costs, fines, and restitution is part of your sentence. And if it is part of your sentence, you need to finish that part before you can have your right to vote restored. Again, that's not the ACLU's position. That's not the position of most people, right? I mean, most courts don't say your court fine is your sentence, right? I mean, some part of your court cost could be from your public defender, from the bill that they send you for incarcerating you, you know, the hotel you didn't want to be in, but they put you in. And then they send you the bill, right? And so, I mean, it really, that's sort of the main point the governor says is fines and court costs are part of the process, you know, part of your sentence. And voting rights shouldn't be automatically restored because people with felony convictions need to show that they have taken steps to be good citizens, right? Hence, no automatic restoration. The governor's position is essentially, we want you to show us through this application process, through sort of putting together these documents, through being current on your fines and fees, that you are ready to rejoin the body politic. So that's sort of my understanding of the governor's
And one
position.
final question
Yeah.
here is, you've mentioned African-American disenfranchisement rates.
Yes.
What do you know about the effect of disenfranchisement for Latinos in Iowa?
I don't. I don't know that specific number. I can get that number though, and I can send it to you. That, I think we have some data. It's sort of less robust data, but I think we have it, and it shows not as high, but still pretty high disenfranchisement rates for Hispanics.
Well, I want to thank Daniel Zeno. All right. Thanks so much. I learned a tremendous, I hope you all did too, I learned a tremendous amount, and I realize there's a lot more I need to learn. Right now, I want to tell you a little story that happened in 2004. I'm not going to tell much about it because I want them to tell it, but there was really a group of high school students that took it upon themselves to try to change Iowa law. And I will never forget the question they asked. The question was, why not? What is the argument against changing and making voting an automatic right once someone's finished their sentence? And the blue sheet that Daniel referred to shares a recent national survey that's really phenomenal because I think 75% of people in the country believe that when a person finishes their sentence, they should be allowed to vote. But what's remarkable about that, if you look at that, is you look at all the demographics. You know, college educated versus not college educated, white versus black, men, women, rural, urban. Across the country, people are saying yes. When a person finishes their sentence, that basic fundamental right should be allowed. So I'm really very, very proud and excited to introduce two activists in Cedar Rapids. When we began to work on that, these two men were a huge part of making it happen. Jarrell Robinson and Charles Crawley really were the pushing it to make it happen. It was a diverse class, and we worked really hard, and they worked really hard. And when the class was over, they continued to want to work on this because it wasn't quite done yet. And they're going to come up and talk about. First, they're going to show a little video of them, and they were 11 years younger. and then they're going to talk about their experiences, and also they're going to talk a little bit about the coalition that's involved, and also perhaps an issue that's going on in Cedar Rapids right now. Hello.
And my name's Chuck Crawley. So as you've seen in the video, back in 2004, we had the honor of being in one of Mike's classes. It was structured a little differently. He gave us the opportunity to pick what we want to do. So first day of class, what do you guys want to do? Here's a few ideas. Here's a few ideas I have. So we kind of brainstormed, and the election was coming up, so it was an anonymous decision. We all wanted to go out and register voters. We keyed in on a certain precinct in the Cedar Rapids area. I believe it was it precinct 13?
13.
7? We had a goal to increase the voter turnout, and we killed the goal. We crushed it. But one of the things that I think kind of just like boggled our mind was we would knock on so many doors and we would talk to so many families where people didn't have the opportunity to vote, and us being 17, 16 at the time, it was just like, wow, why can't you vote? And
yeah.
You kind of start talking to them.
Yeah, amazing. And that for us, it was an eye-opening experience to go out, be so excited to register people. We can't wait till when we're going to be able to vote, and we're so interested in that current election. You know, we wanted to make sure, and it was very nonpartisan, just make sure you're registered to vote. No matter who you vote for, you know, get out there and vote. And so when people started to actually say to us, you know, you get people who shut you down if you've ever gone door to door and registered voters. You know, they'll shut you down right away. It could be they're busy at the time, but some people will say, hey, I'm a felon, I can't vote. And if they spend the time to tell you, one of the guys that really affected me, he was 60-something years old. When he was, before he was, or had just turned 18 years old, he had stole 4 tires from a guy's garage. It exceeded the amount. And to that day, he had never voted before. And I couldn't believe that somebody at that age that had paid taxes that long and been a part of the community that long, children, grandchildren, and so forth, hadn't had a voice in who was making the laws that he was having to abide by every day. And he had it up until then. So that was one of the things that...
And one of the things that kind of hit close to me was I came home excited. Hey, Mom, we're registering voters. You're going to be the first one. I found out that my mom was a felon, and I was like, oh, didn't know that. So, and apparently years ago she had written a bad check. At least that's what she told me. So that kind of made it a little bit more, you know, personal for me. So we wrap that up. Again, we crush our goal. And then the next term comes around, and Mike, hey, do you guys have any ideas for what you want to do this class? And we kind of look at each other like, maybe we should address this voter right issue.
Yeah.
I think it was between that and a $1 tax on cigarettes, which thank God we didn't do that because I turned into a smoker.
Well, and also at the time, we had done it before with Mike where we had gone up and lobbied for something, and it was, I don't like to use the term cookie cutter issue, but it kind of was. It wasn't something that was going to pick up any real steam or anything like that. But this was an issue that we connected with because it was something that we went out and did in the community. And then also when we looked at it from a bigger standpoint, from a worldly standpoint, how can we claim to be the land of the brave, home of the free, and we have the biggest prison population in the world? If we aren't trying to figure out a way to introduce the millions of people that are incarcerated as we speak, for whatever the crime may be, into our community, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. Because at one moment, or whatever the day may be, they will be here. And regardless of if they commit a crime and go right back in, that crime could be to one of us. It could be to your neighbor, your friend, your parent, whatever. At the end of the day, the whole idea was to give people the idea that we want you to be a part of the community. We want you to pay taxes. We want you to do as we do and everybody get along. And if you label people and put labels on them, not just for now, but for the rest of their lives, to me, it's a big disservice, and it's very archaic. I guess that's how I would look at it. Besides us working on this issue with Mike, I'd say the biggest, when you're looking at the issue in totality, you have a lot of people out there who will come up with different reasons why they don't think somebody should be able to vote. You mentioned a number of different reasons, and these were reasons that we heard when we went to the Capitol and we lobbied. And we met with people from both sides. And the issue was trying to find a Democrat and a Republican who would agree together to write a bill that we could actually bring to Congress. And when we went to Congress and we talked to the congressmen and women, they told us, well, you know, if you get a bill together and you can get it to the Capitol, we will speak on it, we'll debate it, we'll get it on the floor. We were able to do that, and it got there, and it was shot down. And that was probably one of our first real experiences with politics. You know, somebody telling you something, saying it's going to go a certain way, writing a bill a certain way, and then they don't write the bill the way that they said they would. They didn't put in the legislation. All those things he had mentioned about infamous crime and paying. These are things that it was very, very different at the time when we were talking about. We were talking about a lot of people who wanted to appear hard and tough on crime, where today we're realizing that it's an issue to lock people up at this kind of rate. So besides that, when they told us that, we actually got it there. They shot that down, and they told us after they shot it down that only the governor can do it. It has to be done by the governor. And so we did everything we could to contact the governor, get the governor involved. I even walked up to the governor at a dinner and had a conversation with him, and he told me he was going to do it. And that summer, he actually did it. And after he did it, surprisingly, they sued the governor and took it to the Supreme Court, and he ended up winning. So that's the bigger one of the bigger problems that I think we face now is that depending on the election and the way the cycle blows, it's not going to be based on right or wrong. It's based on who we're electing, and I think that's one of the bigger issues that should be tackled when it comes to this. So, is there somewhere specifically? One thing that we're doing today, specifically together, we do represent the Big Bang Foundation in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. BigBangFoundation.org is the website. Just a group of friends who got together. We've done music for years, and we decided to take the voices that we do have and apply it to doing positive things in our community, whether it be book drives, neighborhood cleanups, going and reading with the kids at the daycare, just anything that we can do to kind of promote that. Honestly, we are men of color. We do come from the state of Iowa, and we believe in this state, and we want to see things improve. And right now, as you can see, there's a lot of things going on in the world. So we're trying to use our group to be a positive voice for young people and do something in the community that will make a difference. So our goal is to work with Mike Cervantes again, all these years later, to go back and do some of the same things that we were doing. You know, knock on doors. It'll be a little different now with the social media where we can tag people and that kind of stuff, but that'll be fun. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And we plan on hopefully getting together with this coalition that's been put together and see exactly what we can do.
I'm going to say one of the fun things about what we do, how we mentioned, we did music for years. After we graduated high school, we formed a band. We made awesome songs. And we developed a pretty good relationship with the media, a lot thanks to Mike. I remember we would be in classrooms. The kids in this classroom, they're reading social study books, they're writing papers, and Mike has us over here writing letters, making phone calls, sending out press releases, contacting this senator, like just learning how the real world works. So very interesting, and we got to kind of take it and combine it with what we're doing today, how we mentioned the book drive. In Cedar Rapids, there's been a lot of shootings lately. We've had a lot of black-on-black crime, and what's kind of hit home with us is it's the same neighborhood that we grew up in, but these kids are like 14 and 15 years old. So instead of people dressing up in suits and ties and going into the homes and going into the schools, we wanted to kind of give kids someone they can look at, someone they can relate to, and say, you know what, Mom, I kind of look like that guy. He's wearing sweatpants and sandals. He looks like he goes to work every day. He's something that, you know, I can inspire to be. So we're giving these kids role models they can relate to, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. You want to?
Yeah, and so besides that, I mean, and that's the main goal is us coming together, but we are very active as much as we possibly can be. And there was recently, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but a shooting in Cedar Rapids. An unarmed gentleman, not very much information has been released, but this is somebody that we know. And there's a great disconnect when previously a person was shot by a police officer, and within hours, we knew the officer's name. We knew that the officers were justified in shooting this person. And that's basically what we've been spending our time doing today. We actually ran from there because we were actually protesting across from the police department earlier today. Later, we just left actually from the visual where the actual crime had taken place. We're not saying that this is a perfect person. We're not saying that he didn't do anything wrong. What we are asking for is the release of information. We want to know why he was stopped, what prompted you to stop him, what was he doing, because from what his wife has said, he was headed home, he was stopping to grab some pizza and a pop and going to the house. So at this time, we have been given no information whatsoever. The family doesn't have any information. We're about 3 days out, and so, I mean, that's something that, I mean, we've stopped everything pretty much to be with them and do everything we can to kind of shed light on what's taking place there. It's a bigger issue in the sense of, when we talked about this issue, African-American males in the state of Iowa, I mean, this is the #1 state for incarceration. If you look at numbers as opposed to the total number of African Americans here and how many are actually incarcerated. There are more people in the state of California than there are African Americans throughout the whole United States. And if you look at the totality of what the prison system is for Black America, to put it mildly, I say it's a modern form of slavery. The issue here, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, whether you talk about the phone systems that these people are forced to use and then being worked on cents on the dollar. And I'm a kid who grew up visiting prisons. My father was incarcerated when I was a child. I visited numerous states here, and my father was worked, and we were sent cents on the dollar. So if we're gonna be real about, and we know the numbers, and we know that it's 25%, 2%, and all that kind of stuff. There has got to be a realness to how these numbers are affecting the children and the household and the people that are coming from that. And so a small part, even though it's huge, is being able to vote. And that's why this is so important. So.
All right. Yeah.
We may not have time to collect questions, but does anyone have any questions for Charles Woodrow?
Can you say your website again?
BigBangFoundation.org.
Write it down there.
Okay.
My handwriting sucks.
How's he doing?
He is paralyzed. He's on a tube at the moment. We really don't know much else. So.
Is he over at the hospital here?
He's in Iowa City.
Yeah, he's here at the University of Iowa. The latest reports were they don't think he's ever going to have filling from the neck down. So it's
It was what has been in the papers. There was an altercation. After the altercation, he was shot in the throat. He jumped in his car and he drove up a hill, crashed into a police car, and then drove through and crashed into a parking lot. But I mean,
what we believe is, after he was shot, because he was shot inside the vehicle, after he was shot, we believe, like, whether it was some kind of nerves or whatever, that you, or even maybe just trying to run for your life, that you hit the gas, and that's when you collided into the other cars. You know, I would also like to add why we're standing behind it is because we've known this gentleman for over 15 years, and the kind of person that he is, it would be like if one of my friends called me one day and said the same thing happened with Jarrell. He just doesn't have a mean bone in his body, wouldn't harm a fly. I mean, he's the same kind of person. He's loving, he's funny, fun to be around. So what they're projecting, and I really don't want to blame the media because they're going off the information that the police department's given them, which is close to none. And what we're just trying to do is, help get his character out there, let people know what kind of person he is, and then advocate to get that footage and more information released.
Any other questions for Charles or Drell? Well, thank you so much. All right. Well, before we close, I want to do two things. I want to thank a couple of people, special guests who joined us, and that's Mayor Jim Throgmorton in back, as well as State Representative Mary Masher. And of course, everybody here. But are there any final questions people have, or people want to get any more information? I want to share on the blue sheet. There's some information about the. It's connected to the ACLU site, but I just got an email just late this afternoon that www.restorevotesiowa.com is the site for the coalition that's working to make the change in Iowa. It's restorevotesiowa.com. So that's the site that is connecting. Right now, there's 22 organizations that are part of it, trying to make a change, trying to make something happen in Iowa. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for helping co-sponsors. Thanks to everyone for coming, and thanks Daniel Zeno.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.